As of late, Joe Rogan has been highlighting Trump's biggest liabilities. Joe Rogan helped sell Donald Trump as the anti-war, anti-swap outsider in 2024. Now he's the voice of something more dangerous for the White House, a betrayed fan base asking if they backed the wrong guy. Welcome to That's Life, I swear. This podcast is about life's happenings in this world that conjure up such words as intriguing, frightening, life-changing, inspiring, and more. I'm Rick Barron, your host. That said, here's the rest of this story. Okay, now I want you to gather around, true believers. Pull up a chair, because this one is going to sting a little bit. You see, there was a time not so long ago when Joe Rogan represented something almost magical in American politics. He was the guy. The podcaster with the massive platform and the open mind and the 3-hour conversations that made people feel like they were finally getting the real story. He sat across from Donald Trump for nearly 3 hours in October of 2024, and the internet vibrated with excitement. Days later, he endorsed Trump. The anti-establishment had its champion. The swamp was about to be drained. No more stupid wars. No more secrets, just vibes, freedom, and the dawning of a new era. Well, 16 months later, those vibes have curled considerably. Rogan has spent a sizable chunk of 2025 and early 2026 publicly airing his bewilderment, not at his critics, not at the media, but at the man he helped put in the White House. Issue by issue, promise by promise, the edifice of expectation had been quietly dismantled. Who could have possibly seen this coming? Almost everyone, but let's not dwell on that. So how did Joe get here? What are his grievances that his loyalty is now morphed into betrayal? Well, let's look at a few. But trust me, the list is growing. The latest and most explosive disappointment is the war with Iran, which is, to be clear, an actual war, with bombs and casualties and no defined endpoint. This is the kind of development that tends to complicate a no more stupid wars brand promise. It just seems so insane based on what he ran on, Rogan said, his voice carrying the wary disbelief of a man who pre-ordered something online and received a completely different item. Well, Joe went on to say he ran on no more wars and these stupid, senseless wars. And then we have one that we can't even really clearly define why we did it. Well, you're not alone. Yes, the man who ran against endless foreign entanglements and neocon adventurism has, in his second term, launched a military campaign against Iran, a country with which the United States has no mutual defense treaty obligations, and whose bombing has upset the majority of Americans, including independents by a margin of roughly 2-1, say they oppose it. It is by some measures the most unpopular new military conflict in decades. But surely there's a good reason. There is always a good reason. And I'm sure the reason will be the greatest reason in the world, one that people have never seen before. I'm sorry, got off on a tangent there. Now, Rogan, to his credit, suspects the reason might be Israel, a thought he voiced aloud on his podcast to the polite horror of people who previously cheered his willingness to say the quiet parts loudly. Unless we're acting on someone else's interests, like particularly Israel's interests, Joe said, it just didn't make any sense to me. One assumes this was not in the promotional materials for the October 2024 endorsement. Now, before the war, there were the Epstein files. Ah, yes. A cause that has united conspirators across the political spectrum in the shared conviction that the truth is out there. Sounds like the X-Files. If only someone would just release them. Trump, it was widely believed, would be that someone. Why? Well, because he said things that implied he might be, and because hope is a powerful and occasionally humiliating emotion. The theory held that Trump would storm into the office, throw open the vaults, and expose the global elite to the sunlight of accountability. Drain the swamp, name the names, let justice ring from sea to shining sea. But no. Instead, the FBI had announced there is no evidence that Epstein had clients. Oh, the shock. Redactions have appeared in curious and inconsistent places. Trump himself referred to the Epstein matter as a hoax. Rogan's response to his latest development was not to quietly update his priors. It was predictably louder. He called the FBI statement the ghastliest gaslighting SHIT I've ever heard in my life. He said the handling looks effing terrible for the administration. He openly entertained the notion that Trump either knew about Epstein's activities or was now covering for those who did. This is not a hoax, Rogan said, in what may stand as a sentence that best captures the current political moment. A recent CNN poll from January of 2026 found that 6% of Americans were satisfied with what had been released of the Epstein files. My God, almost all those pages were black. A recent Reuters survey found 65% believe the government is hiding information about Epstein's death, and 75% suspect it's hiding information about his clients. In other words, the people who felt most strongly about Trump would fix this are now among the most convinced he's part of the problem. The swamp, it seems, has excellent drainage prevention. Now we come to immigration. Immigration was supposed to be clean, logical, surgical. Go after the criminals, the gang members, the cartel enforcers, the people everyone agreed should not be here. This was the pitch. This was what made it easy to support. Well, brother, it didn't look that way. Rogan began raising concerns in April of 2026, almost apologetically at first, as if he were filing a gentle complaint with a contractor rather than reconsidering a major political commitment. He called the deportations to El Salvador's infamous CCOP prison horrific. He questioned in July of 2026 why construction workers and gardeners were being swept up in the raids. Not cartel members, not gang members, not drug dealers, he noted with great exasperation. Just construction workers showing up in construction sites and raiding them. Gardeners. Like really? I mean, did the gardeners trim the shrubs incorrectly? Now, by autumn, Joe was invoking the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police, also known as ICE, as a reference point for what he was watching on television. He said, "Are we really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to?" This was not one suspect, as Rogan had imagined, but rather the administration he had endorsed 13 months earlier. The killings of Renee Good and Alex Pretty in Minneapolis in January of 2026, both caught up in enforcement operations, deepened his unease. Trump's approval on immigration, which sat about 10 points positive a year ago, now sits about 10 points negative. The people who wanted border security apparently didn't picture this exact thing when they voted for it, which raises interesting questions about what they did picture. Oh, and then we come to the dumbest thing of all, tariffs. Rogan had been somewhat less exercised about tariffs, but he called Trump's moves against Canada stupid and the dumbest effing feud, and expressed that he was scared of the sweeping economic changes being imposed. Canada, a country that has existed peacefully on America's northern border for its entire history, and which shares a mutual defense treaty, culture, and roughly $900 billion in annual trade, was briefly treated as an adversary. This was also not heavily advertised during the 2024 campaign. Perhaps the strangest element of this entire story is Trump's response, which has been essentially nothing. Oh, big surprise there. Asked about Rogan's mounting criticisms, Trump told NBC News that they've spoken recently and that Rogan was a great guy, and that the administration's real problem was in its public relations operation. "I don't think we're good at public relations," Trump said. Really? Now, this is a remarkable diagnosis. Think about this. The suggestion is not that the policies are wrong, or that the promises were broken, or that a significant number of supporters have legitimate grievances. The suggestion is that the war with Iran, the Epstein non-transparency, the immigration raids, and the tariffs are simply being misperceived, and that with better messaging, the people who feel betrayed would understand they are not, in fact, betrayed. Yeah, clear as mud. What is clear is that coalitions assembled on vibes and the collective fantasy of a leader who means something different to everyone who supports them have a structural fragility that no amount of podcast appearances can fully conceal. Now, Rogan wasn't just a random supporter of Trump. He embodied a certain anti-establishment, no more stupid wars, drain the swamp voter. When Trump moved in ways that looked unmistakable, from the establishment on Iran and secrecy around Epstein, Rogan flipped from validator to critic, making that sense of betrayal more visible. Rogan's shifts lines up with polling that already shows Trump's weakest numbers on Iran, immigration, tariffs, and the economy. The story illustrates how a single high-profile voice like Joe Rogan can crystallize widespread but diffuse discomfort, especially among independent and soft supporters. So what can we learn from this story? What's the takeaway? Well, the takeaway is that when leaders like Trump break away core promises or values that held their coalition together, even their friendliest influencers can become powerful amplifiers of disillusionment. And that backlash tends to center on issues where the public already feels uneasy. Well, there you go, my friends. That's life, I swear. For further information regarding the material covered in this episode, I invite you to visit my website, which can be found on Apple Podcasts for show notes and the episode transcript. As always, I thank you for the privilege of you listening and your interest. Be sure to subscribe here or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you soon